All right, so this week our collector actually worked mainly in North America, but she did do some collecting outside of that region, and she has connections to some other collectors that we featured. And I found some good pictures related to her story, so I will be sharing that today. We don't actually have any of her specimens here at Tennessee, but several of our global collaborators do. So this one is from the Duke University Herbarium. And it was collected by, this is well abbreviated, Margaret S. Brown, and it was in January of 1930. Excuse me, and the locality is listed as Milk River, Jamaica. And that is actually a small town on the southern coast, which was, and it's named after a river called the Milk River. It's also the name of a mineral spring, which was and still is a popular attraction for tourists. This is just an older postcard from that area, and it was advertising the Milk River Bath mineral spring. So this is the specimen. It is identified as Herbarium dominguense, which per the flora of North America is found at low elevations in dry areas, on the bark of trees, shrubs, and exposed roots, on rotting wood, and also on rocks. And our label actually said this one was growing on the bark of a tree. And it's been observed in Texas, Mexico, and Panama, as well as the West Indies, including Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico and St. Thomas, and then also on the Galapagos Islands. So our collector's full name was Margaret Sibella Brown. She was born in 1866 to Richard and Barbara Brown in Sydney Mines in Nova Scotia, which you may know is one of 3 maritime provinces on the eastern coast of Canada. She was born with a twin sister, Elizabeth, and they had 3 younger siblings, Annie, Richard, and Lillian. And as promised, there are some great photos of her online, which I know is not always the case. So I'm happy to share this one, adorable one of her at age 7. And this is her with her twin sister, Elizabeth. I don't really know which one is which. And they're in the conservatory of their home, which was called Beech Hill. And there are actually a lot of cool photos of their house online from apparently an old photo album. And it had a large garden and a greenhouse. So she grew up surrounded by plants. Her father worked as the general manager of a coal mine. And so she was raised in a fairly wealthy family and was able to receive a pretty varied education, both locally and abroad. So in Canada, she attended the Anglican School for Girls and then King's College in Halifax, graduating with a Bachelor of Arts degree. When she was 17, she spent a year at the Anglo-German Institute, which was a finishing school in Stuttgart, Germany. And she studied French and China painting in London before returning to Nova Scotia in 1885. And then, so still just 19 years old, Brown then attended the Victoria School of Art and Design, which is now the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. And she may have done some teaching there. It's not mentioned in all the sources. But during World War I, Brown acted as the honorary secretary for the Halifax branch of the Canadian Red Cross. And she was asked by a Dr. Robert Thompson from the University of Toronto to help organize efforts in Nova Scotia to collect sphagnum moss for use as field dressings and ambulance mattress stuffing. And you may remember a similar story in our presentation on Russian bryologist Lydia Savich-Lubitskaya, who researched how sphagnum could be useful in war efforts due to its super absorbance and antibacterial properties. And so this activity was said to have rekindled a previous interest that she had in bryology. And so she began to more serious study of mosses and liverworts. And she was interested in both bryophyte ecology and taxonomy. Brown collected widely in Canada, especially in Cape Breton, which is the particular northern island of Nova Scotia where she lived. But she also collected in locations across the width of Canada, including the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario and the Selkirk Mountains, which are on the opposite side of Canada in British Columbia. Brown would also collect mosses during her holiday travels, including winter trips to Spain, the French Riviera, to Italy and also to Jamaica, including the specimen that I shared earlier, which was one of many that she collected there in January and February, which I would presume would be a nice time to be somewhere warmer than Canada. Brown was a member of the Moss Exchange Club, which became the British Bryological Society, and the Sullivan Moss Society, which is now the American Bryological and Lichenological Society. Through these organizations, she met and collaborated with other bryologists, including Elizabeth Britton, bryologist and co-founder of the New York Botanical Garden. And in the early 1920s, Margaret was actually Elizabeth's assistant on expeditions to Puerto Rico and Trinidad. And so you'll see her name alongside Elizabeth and her husband, Nathaniel Britton, on specimens that they collected during those expeditions. Brown published at least 8 scientific papers. The first one I could find was on hepatics in Georgia in 1924, where she writes, "Last winter, while New England lay rather deeper than usual under snowdrifts, the writer had the good fortune to spend the months of February and March in the delectable town of Thomasville, Georgia, and now proposes to give the bryologist a list of the hepatics picked up on daily walks in hope that some other winter visitor may be interested and continue the good work." So then she goes on to list all the species that she found on her trip. But she started, one of her biggest works is she started publishing a comprehensive catalog of Nova Scotian mosses and liverworts, starting in 1929, with further additions in 1936, 1945, and 1951. She described a new species of moss, Antisthodon neoscoticus, which she found in Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia, in 1932. And she also wrote describing mosses found in Syria that she received from William Bacon Evans, who was the cousin of the botanist H.S. Kennard. Brown corresponded and worked with other international bryologists and helped to instruct the next generation of bryologists. It's said that her student John Erskine encouraged her to donate her collection to Acadia University, which she did in 1950. She was a directorate on the board and a member of the education committee for the Victoria School of Art and Design. She served as president of the Halifax Floral Society and was the oldest living member of the Nova Scotia Institute of Science until her death at the age of 95 in 1961. So during her lifetime, she was recognized in a number of ways. She received an honorary diploma in 1934 after helping to get funding for a new campus for the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. In 1950, she was awarded an honorary master's degree from Acadia University, and it said they actually offered her a PhD, but she declined it in favor of a master's. And there's actually a picture of her accepting her degree here. And in the graduation program, she's listed as probably the chief maritime authority on mosses and liverworts. And Brown was posthumously inducted into the Nova Scotia Scientific Hall of Fame in 2010. So specimen-wise, it's a bit tricky with a last name like Brown, which I found out is the 2nd most common last name in Canada and the 4th most common last name in the United States, which makes it kind of hard to filter exactly hers out of all the Browns in the portals. But so anyways, this is not comprehensive, but I found at least 2,700 specimens in the Bryophyte portal, 11 in the lichen portal, 5 in the vascular symbiota, and 500 plus in GBIF. And sadly, because most of hers are North American, a lot of them don't have specimen images, but there were some pictures of some of the vascular plants. So that is Margaret Sibella Brown, an influential Canadian bryologist. And I'll end with a quote from one of her students who wrote that during the next 25 years, Ms. Margaret S. Brown carried on the work, meaning the study of Nova Scotia mosses, spending her summers in many parts of the province. And anyone who has learned anything about mosses in this quarter century owes much to her knowledge and kindness. So another great story, and thanks again for listening.